The Learning Tree, Chapter 16, Part 2. Before you were born, during that time, I came only to know the way people could really live on this earth if they only tried. He twisted the steering wheel and they turned the corner into Logan's Grove. It wasn't easy for either. Folks, black and white, did some talking against her taking in Sadie Craven's white son, but their complaints fell on deaf ears. I didn't miss a day of school or go without eating for 2 years, mind you. Newt was quiet. Doc Craven reflected for a moment or so. Early in the third year, my mother died, and your mother paid my way to her funeral in St. Louis. I stayed there and went to school on the money my mother managed to leave me. I don't know where she got it. Why'd you ever come back here? Doc pulled up alongside the Winger yard and stopped. I can't exactly say why, Newt. It's as good a place as any to help people who really need helping. Let's go in. Oh, by the way, your sisters and brother came after you left this morning. Newt followed him into the house, and Doc went on into Sarah's room. Clara, Lou, and Roy got up smiling as Newt crossed the hushed parlor to greet them. He hugged and kissed his two sisters and shook hands with Roy. Lou looked about the same, but Clara, who Jack called the Marion one, had changed. She looked skinnier to Newt, and she was dressed in fancier clothes than when he had seen her several years before. Roy looked the way Newt felt all sharp Chicagoans should look. Hair parted to the side, striped suit, striped tie, white spats, and needle-nose shoes. He'll be telling us some wild tales about Chicago, Newt thought as he pumped his hand. The next day, Newt, Clint, and Roy were lying in the yard beneath the big apple tree. It was hot, and Roy lay face down in a clump of cool grass, and the other two flat on their backs. Newt held a string tied to the leg of a huge June bug that spun lazily about their heads. Clint said, "What's that June bug doing hanging around here in August?" "I've seen them later than this," Newt said. They were silent a while, then Clint said, "Tell us about the Windy City, Roy. Anything happened to you lately?" "Not much. Got robbed last week, that's about all." Clint and Newt raised to their elbows in simultaneous motion, and Clint's eyes popped. "Robbed? Hell, man, tell us all about it. What happened?" "Wasn't nothing out of the ordinary, Clint. Guy just stuck a big .45 at the back of my head and told me to fork over." Clint cocked his head to one side. "Well, come on, what'd you do?" "What'd I do? I gave him the dough. What else could I do?" Roy chomped off the end of a blade of grass, winked slyly at Newt, and suppressed a smile. "I was lucky he didn't slug me. He had me in the clutch, and I wasn't about to give him no back talk." "Didn't you say nothing to him at all?" "Sure, I said, 'Here you are, sir. Have a pleasant journey.'" Clint shook his head, chuckled, and fell back on the ground. "Boy, you sure lead a hell of a wonderful life, Roy." "Wonderful? What's so wonderful about a gun pointing at the back of your head? Now you're lucky to be here, away from all the crap you have to take in a big city. Right, Newt?" Newt sensed the whole tale was a lie, but he was flattered by the confidence. He winked at Roy. "Right you are, Roy, right you are." "Just the same," Clint said dreamily. "It must be terrific. Action and dames and everything. Nice, nice dames, boy. You kiddin'? A bunch of money-grabbing chicks looking to take you for everything you got. Nice dames, boy. Some of them would steal the white off rice. Now, Clint, you better be thankful you're here in the flats." "What else happened you ain't told us about?" "Couple other things. Ain't got time now. Maybe tomorrow." Roy jumped to his feet and walked away. The June bug lit on Newt's nose. He watched with crossed eyes as it crawled up the bridge of his nose to his forehead, dragging the dirty string over his lips. Suddenly the bug took off with a jerk, leaving its leg on the string. Clint propped himself on the elbows, watching the insect's crazy flight to freedom. Then he said, "If I was that goddamn bug, I'd fly straight to Chicago without stopping." He got to his feet, brushed the dirt from his behind, and moved over to the porch where Jack Winger sat smoking. "How's Mama Winger doing, Papa?" Jack puffed a couple of times, removed the pipe, and spat. "Seems to be holding her own." Then he went on puffing. Clint pushed his hands deep into his overall pockets, kicked the side of the porch, looked to the sky, and spat. "Rain for sure, way back there, Papa Winger." "Yep, does look like it." Clint's hand jumped from his pockets to the shoulder straps near the bib. "It's hot," he complained. Then he turned abruptly, his mouth twitching nervously, and hurried down the path toward his shack. When Jack turned in puzzlement to look after him, he'd already disappeared below the hill. Newt remained in the shade of the tree, squinting toward the mirages of shimmering heat that hung over the cornfields and the plains beyond. The small talk had relaxed him and left a warm and special feeling, but now a sense of guilt crept over him, so he got up and called, "Papa, I'm going to the hospital to see Earl." "All right, boy. Tell him I'll be to see him before long." Clint was right about the rain. It started about 6 that evening, and by 7:30 the creeks and rivers were reaching their watersides. Marcus Savage had been rummaging through the junk in the yard when the first downpour came. He scurried into the shack, leaving the door cracked to let fresh air in. Then, sitting on the floor with his back to the wall, he watched the silver rain coming down in sheets beyond the opening. He pondered his circumstances. Ain't got nobody now. All on account of that Winger son of a bitch. Couldn't keep his trap shut, helpin' white trash 'stead of his own kind. Course, Pa killed Jake, the dirty bastard had it comin'. I spent a year in hell on account of him. He plucked a small ant crawling over his knee and held it for a moment, watching it wiggle helplessly. Then his powerful black fingers rubbed it into nothingness. He took a raw turnip from his pocket and pulled a knife from the overall bib, pressed a tiny metal button at the end of it, and a huge blade popped from the groove. He peeled the skin, tossed it aside, and sank his teeth into the starchy white meat, chewing viciously. But I'll get Winger. He's been sticking close to home. Sooner or later he'll come down to the river, and he sensed a movement at the door. It was a big field rat seeking shelter. As it slithered through the opening, Marcus sprang up. Get, you son of a bitch. The frightened rat bared its yellow fangs and backed off cautiously, then whirled and fled back into the wetness.